listener, as you're waiting for this podcast to start, maybe look at your phone or your computer and hit the subscribe button. We need subscribers for sure. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast. We put a lot of effort into it, and we love the people that listen to us. We want to hear from you, and we want you to subscribe. Now let's get on with this. Welcome to episode number 60. That is 60 episodes of the National Land Realty podcast, where we discuss all things land. Our goal here is to inform, educate, and entertain those of you who own land or are interested in the buying and selling of land throughout the United States. My name is Mac Christian, and I am the Chief Marketing Officer here at National Land Realty. I'll be your host for this episode. Now, real estate agents, once they are licensed, can work on a variety of transactions. Those transactions might be commercial, they could be residential, agricultural, or merely just land. The differences between those specializations are drastic, and there's numerous credentials out there that solidify the specialty of a real estate agent. While National Land Realty has a highly successful commercial division, we are here today to talk more about rural land, or as we call it, land professionals. What makes a land professional different than a residential real estate agent besides the name? We're here to talk today with Texas land professional Wayne Dunson about exactly that. Wayne actually works on both residential and rural real estate, which provides terrific insight on the differences between the two. Now, sit back and enjoy. I am sitting here with the one and the only Wayne Dunson out of Texas. And Wayne, you've been on here before. So, just kind of go through again real quick. How did you got started in land? You went to school and your family it was kind of a thing in your family, right?
Yeah, for sure. So, I used to work for USDA. That's what I went to school to do, to be a range specialist. And got out of grad school, and I did that for a while. But I got licensed to practice real estate while I was in grad school. And my folks just always told me that, one of these days you're going to need that. And it turned out the government found that to be a conflict of interest. So I never could use it. So I eventually just left behind that really fun government career and went full-time real estate in 2008. So but that was primarily residential, and it wasn't until I found National Land in 21 that I got to really spread my wings and bring the passion back into what I do now, which is real estate, and adding in the land factor, which has been huge for me.
Yeah, and so we were, our discussion here today is sort of, land versus residential, and you have worked in both markets pretty heavily, and being someone who has done both, you have a background that lends itself to it. You worked in range management, right? So, you are well educated, well steeped in knowledge for land management. What does it take for somebody to be able to work effectively in land real estate? And can a residential agent just walk in and do it?
The land, when you start looking at land sales, and this could just be subjective on my side or opinionated or whatever you want to say. But if you don't know what you're talking about when it comes to land, especially if you go out and meet with a landowner and they start showing you around what they've got and you have absolutely no idea what you're looking at or how to market it or what it's worth. Most of these guys are more educated than the average bear, especially landowners, and they know what they've got. And they are going to pick you out really fast if you don't have some kind of knowledge and expertise or some type of background in that field. You can't just get licensed off the internet and run out there and become a ranch specialist. As far as I'm concerned, I just don't see how you would make it and be successful without some serious training and some help to learn that knowledge. And so, you see a lot of people that get into the land game, they have an ag background. Maybe they grew up running cattle or ranching or farming. If you grow up in that industry, well, that's a little different because you've got a working knowledge of the land. And so that helps. But as far as just deciding one day, I just don't think I want to work my office job anymore. I'm going to get licensed and sell multi-million-dollar ranches. It's going to be a tough gig.
How does that compare, say, to somebody saying, all right, I'm going to get my real estate license. I'm going to walk in and sell some residential real estate, day one. And let's make an even comparison, right? Like, $1 million ranch versus $1 million residential house. What's sort of the comparison and knowledge said? Would somebody be able to just walk in and sell the house versus sell a ranch?
No, especially if you're looking, at least in my market, $1 million is going to be that's starting to get onto the more high end. And some of those clients they're pretty educated too, pretty well versed on what properties are worth to some degree. And they can be a little more needy. And they want their property truly marketed, right? Not just stab a sign in there and stick it in MLS and hope for the best, right? They're probably going to want some real stuff done to prove that you're actively marketing this $1 million property. So even that's going to take some training. I mean, most of the licensing, when you get out, there's supposed to be some type of training that takes place. I feel like data is more readily available, though, when it comes to residential. So if you come into a residential office and there's agents, you've got your broker or maybe some transaction coordinator or a manager, they can kind of generate some leads and send you to some home deals. And I mean, most everybody has at least minimal knowledge of what it takes to live in a property. Now, if they've never owned a home, they may be pretty ignorant on all of it. But just the basic facts, I think residential is just an easier market. I mean, you can get on HGTV and watch stuff about home sales. Now, some of it's sensational, and you're going to have to truly learn what really works. I mean, so there's pitfalls to all of it. It just takes a different skill set. And I mean, I just got licensed in New Mexico, and I don't know how to use their forms. I'm going to have to do some training over there. I don't know their market. I'm going to have to learn that market over there. Texas is a different story, but even then, I had to have training. When you go through and take all your coursework, you get a basic concept of real estate principles and brokerage and law and contracts, but it's all on the job training. So, from the aspect of somebody thinking, I'm just going to go out there and become a millionaire overnight by getting my real estate license, the reality of it is it's not that easy. You're going to have to get out there and actually learn on the job. And some of that comes by making mistakes, kind of getting buried in the weeds there and working your way through some stuff.
What's the difference in, say, like the networking that you do in real estate in residential versus real estate for land? Because that's sort of it. Like, you're trying to become known. You're trying to like get out and introduce yourself to people. What's sort of how does that differentiate between the two markets?
Man, you just hit on my biggest kryptonite right now for me. Seriously. So when I first got into residential, I'd been working in another part of the state on ranches where I rarely saw other people. And so I didn't understand the business side of that, the networking, how all that worked. And so I joined a business networking group called BNI International.
I was going to say, was it BNI?
Yes. And so I joined BNI here locally to try to meet some other business professionals, to get some type of a little referral network going, right? And so you got somebody in there that sells promotional products and pens and hats. You got an insurance person and a plumber, and
you got your accountant in there. You got your contractor. You got your plumber. Yes. You got your insurance sales. Yep.
Yes. And I had to learn a 60-second commercial about how to ask for referrals and this, that, and the other. You know what? Honestly, it was beneficial coming from my background. I needed to learn that. And that was a pretty easy referral network to set up right there. And bam, we're all in town. I can drive to anybody's house that they send me to in 10 minutes or 15. I mean, so it was a lot easier to lay the groundwork to start trying to get established. Ranch sales, I'm still to this day working on spreading out my network. Part of it's because I do divide time, between residential and residential and land. But it's a little different. So what I'm finding, one of my favorite guys to talk to, he's the main sales dude at a feed store. He knows absolutely everybody, and he knows what's going on with everybody in the county. You might as well be going to the barbershop. The dude has all the gossip.
I was going to say, so I grew up, that was my family business, was a feed mill. My uncle and my grandpa built a feed mill, and I think my grandpa built it with his dad. It's 115 years old now, 110 years old now, somewhere in that range. It's since been bought out by another family, but I grew up from the time I was about 7 shoveling grain in this thing. And I remember exactly that. Like I was always like, my uncle has the coolest job ever. Cause like he throws a couple bags in the back of a truck and then talks to whoever was driving the truck for the next hour. And it's like, how's the weather? What's the harvest like? How many head, do you need more feed for your head? It's like sort of a trite question. You can't ask somebody how many head of cattle they're running. That's like asking them what religion they are, how they're going to vote or whatever. Like you can't do that or you're going to get slapped around. But it would be like, like, how are you doing? Do you need more grain? And it like, so then they'd talk commodity prices. I mean, it was just, and then we go into like, did you see what Frank's doing next door? And they're irrigating like a dummy. And I mean, this conversation just keeps going. And you're exactly right. It's like a barbershop. It's like they know all the gossip. The feed store knows all the gossip.
Yeah. And I really need to probably branch out a little bit more. And I'm working on it. I mean, I really am. I'm just the area that I'm at, you cover 3 hours or so from where my home office is. It just takes a little time to spread yourself out. So I'm going to have to be a little more intentional, but I get a lot too from talking to attorneys, especially in these little title companies, because they're dealing with estates and families transferring property amongst family members. I'm seeing it a lot, at least in my area. And I don't know if this is a thing everywhere, but generationally, a lot of these younger generations just don't have any desire to even work the land. And the values are so high now. I mean, I can see why they wouldn't, I mean, what their grandparents gave for it back in the day, they could run cattle and pay for it. You can't buy one of those, run cows and make money. I mean, you're buying it for investment or recreational or whatever in most cases. So I'm seeing a lot of turnover, and I'm working on one right now with an attorney. Fortunately, he reached out to me, and he's working on an estate. He needed help, right? This piece of land was out in the middle of absolutely nowhere, and he wasn't going to drive out there and look at it for the family. He needed a guy that knew about land values, knew the area, knew a little bit about oil and gas, which I have some experience with too. And so he asked me to go look at it. And so that's been a pretty powerful resource. But I've even found that surveyors and appraisers, man, I'm having to network with all these guys because it's just a different world than just logging into MLS and going to the B&I group. It takes a lot more hustle and a lot more involvement. I think that the more local you can get with the people in those communities, the more trust you gain. It's a little different world for sure.
I think that what you just pointed to kind of illustrates it, right? To where when you're working in residential, you're in a condensed area of population, and so you brought up B&I, this business networking international, right? I've been to several of those. When I worked in ad agency sales, I would go around and meet a lot of those groups, and it was like, what the part that I would always run into, it's like you want to network, but the only people you're meeting are other people trying to sell you things too. And it's like what I read into a lot is like, well, I want to meet people. I don't want to I don't need insurance right now. Invariably that would happen. It was like, it's almost like they need to set that thing of like, nobody sells to anybody in this room. It is strictly get to know you. And then like when conversation comes up, you know who to refer. Because it was like, there would be this kind of like sales pitch to me. And it's like, I didn't come here to buy anything. No. And so there's some of that. You got to find the right group, because some of the groups are like that. Some of the groups are not. Some of the groups are really based on referral and getting to know you. Because it would be like you would show up and it would say, well, this is your person for insurance. Like, well, I don't know this guy. Like, I'm not necessarily going to refer him right now because I just met him. So I'm not going to throw that referral right now because I don't know if my customer is going to get taken care of. And so you have to go through that get to know you process and make sure that it is indeed a good fit. But in those business networking groups, you've got a readily made population right there, and you're in a city center. You can go out, you can meet people, they know people, and you've got the 6 degrees of separation law going on all over, because like somebody knows somebody that knows somebody everywhere in town. Then you get to land where you have to go to the feed store to even get information about who's nearby and who's buying what or what's going on, or an estate attorney who's working with somebody 6 hours away But like you just said it yourself, the estate attorney is not even willing to go check it out themselves, right? Like that's how far away it is. So you're trying to get to know people on this wide basis. And then when you're people in a condensed population, their guard is down because they meet people on a regular basis, right? They're used to engaging with strangers on a regular basis. When you get to the rural communities, it is guarded. It's straight up like, you ain't from here. Who are you? And like, it's so not only is it hard to meet them in the first place, but you've got to go through like a fraternity hazing just to like give them a pie. Like, just because like you've got to prove that you don't have an agenda. You're just seeking to get to know them. You are just networking. You're not out there to take advantage of them. Like their guard is up. And so the networking is totally different, right? Like it's a whole different ballgame.
Oh man, yeah, and it comes. You run into some other stuff too. I went and looked at a lady's place, and it had a lot of potential, but there was only one windmill on this whole place, and that would have been the only water source. And I said, "Look, I think you could do a lot better if you get this windmill repaired." And she said, "Well, I had a guy quoted, and it's going to cost me $10,000." And I said, "You could drill a whole new well. Like that doesn't even make sense to just repair this windmill." And so I referred her a guy that I know that fixes windmills, and that's kind of a unique trade. But it's somebody that I know, and I got him out there, and he fixed her windmill for like $800.
Oh my gosh!
And had that thing up and running, no problem. Just put some new rods and some leathers in the windmill. Bam! She had it working, and that thing hadn't ran in like 8 years. And now all of a sudden she's putting feed out, and she almost didn't list the property because she was like, wow, we're seeing deer. I've been feeding raccoons. Me and my husband just go out there now and take the dog, and we're having so much fun. Ultimately, they did sell, but having that guy, right? And just like with our preferred provider, that the contractor list, the thing that we're putting together on our website for the people that we could say, hey, I've worked with these people. That's kind of the coolness of that tool that we have. But I need to make sure that guy's on that list because he saved my bacon on that deal. But
yeah, you do. So they're talking about the preferred service provider program.
Yes, yeah,
and put together on our website, which is it's exactly that. It's people that you've worked with that you have to have worked with them before. They have to have a good reputation. You put them on there for business referrals.
Yeah, and me and this guy go back to working on a ranch together. Like, I mean, I've known that dude forever. I know he's honest, and turns out he's just wicked good with windmills too. And that's all he does. Like, he's a windmill guy. It's sort of a unique thing, but it turned out that it was invaluable to know that guy. But you talk about people not knowing who you are. I get contacted a lot by folks.
There's just something about getting away to the Smoky Mountains. Step out on a hiking trail, zoom across a zip line, splash at water parks, shop till you drop, and say hello to the statue of our hometown hero, Dolly Parton. Discover the thrill of visiting the Smoky Mountains and reconnect with those you love the most in Sevierville, Tennessee. Learn more at visitsevierville.com. That's visit SEVIERVILLE.com.
That don't live anywhere near where their property is. Nowhere near. It's family land. They've inherited it. Maybe they're getting royalties in the mail, so they just sat on it until the production goes down. They're like, I'm going to sell it now. And I went out and looked at a place for the first time, and this was last year, and I've since sold this property. And I had a guy cut me off with a Jeep. He had an AR-15 in the front seat, and he was ready to get down because he had absolutely no idea who I was. And somebody else had been spotted on a neighboring ranch, and the description of that truck looked similar to mine, and that truck wasn't supposed to be there. Turned out, because I'm from out here, we knew buddies, and my old college professor from grad school runs cattle on a ranch that he helps manage, and we knew each other. Next thing you know, I got a sunburn on my left arm, hanging out the window, talking to the guy. But he was ready to hold me up and get the sheriff there because he thought I was not supposed to be on that ranch. So, and I didn't take it offensive. I thought, what a great neighbor. He's just looking out for everybody else. But you're not going to have that happen in a residential when you just show up at a house.
No, never. Heck, you could have squatters there for a year and nobody would know.
No, you probably have to fight to have them removed by the sheriff. They may be trying to claim it with adverse possession.
Oh, totally that. Well, and so you just spoke to another thing that is it's a definite, like, it's a rural thing. It's the who do you know game. Like you meet somebody from a small town, and it's like, then you go through the process of how long you've been there, because if it's within 5 years, you're not really a local yet. And so if it's within 5 years, you're not necessarily embedded. And then it's down to, who do you know? Do you know so-and-so? Do you know? And if you know somebody that's a common name, it's like, okay, I can find out about you now. And then it's like, who else do you know? And you go through this, it's a vetting game of like, are you really, are you of this community? Like, do you belong here? And it's not like a suspicious, crazy game. It's just that like different people have different agendas, and you've got to be careful about that. And when it comes to small towns, one person can make a larger impact, because in a large community, like a city, an urban area, one person's not going to make or break your reputation. One person's like, no one cares. Like, one person could slander you and no one ever is going to hear about it. But in a small town, one person says the wrong thing, you get your hair done at the wrong place or whatever, everyone knows the next day. So you have to like know and be careful. And if you rip somebody off, you're done. Like, that's.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You don't want to do that. You're never going to do business in that county again. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Because everyone's going to know within a week.
Well, you hit on something too that I wasn't really thinking about. So when you look at the number of realtors in my market, there's, I think, upwards of around 3,000, that's not huge, but it's a decent sized MSA, probably around 250,000 people in 2 counties. We've got 2 MLSs. I'm a member of both boards, but I primarily sell in one. And there's about 800 people that are set up in that MLS. And there may be, on a good month, 150 sales. And just like, so that's in 1 month in our MLS and that board. So that's 150 houses that have moved. That's not that much when you've got hundreds of realtors, right? That's still a lot of people not getting to sell that month. But if you look at look at the first quarter of what's Region 3, I think is what it's called here at the Real Estate Research Center on land sales, there were 70 sales in the first quarter of tons of counties. So you've got a whole lot less volume. Now there's less ranch realtors, but because there's less volume, it's still a very highly competitive game, more so than I would have ever thought before I got into it.
And I was going to say too, like, your sales cycle is longer with land. Like, to residential, you're freaking out if your listing has been on the market for 3 months, right? Like, that's like, you're like, oh no, something is wrong. But with land, it's not there's been quality listings priced appropriately on the market for 5 years because they're unique, or, a year is not unheard of at all. Actually, I would say a year is probably fairly common. Those ones that like get picked up and get sold within a couple months, like that's a sweet thing right there. But I would say that's not the norm.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I mean, you look at average days on market. I wish I had the stats right now for the residential board, but it's probably around 40 to 45 days. Yeah. Not bad at all. So you can pretty much bet if you list a house from list and price it all right, and it's in a good location, good price range, you're going to list it, get it under contract, close it, and be paid 90 days, and you're on to the next one, just on average. And yeah, land, that's just not traditionally how that goes, for sure. And it's a little different. I mean, I can go through with my little Matterport camera and do a quick little home tour and take some pictures and do whatever. And it's not that difficult to market that. And as soon as we load it in the MLS, it's just going to shoot out to all these other sites like Realtor.com and Zillow and Troya and whatever, and anything that we're syndicating with. So you get a lot of exposure fast. You think about what we go through on the expense side. If I've got to drive 3 hours to go look at a piece of ground, just first visit. And then maybe I go back again to meet with the landowner a second time. That's another round trip of 6 hours. Maybe I'm going to take my Can-Am, right?
I was say, you got your side-by-side out there too. You got whatever you spend on the side-by-side, whatever you spend on the gas for the side-by-side, repair for that, because invariably someday you're getting stuck in that thing when you're touring a property. You got your trailer, you got your trailer expense that you take out there too. And so then it's not just the gas, it's the gas plus the weight of the trailer and the side-by-side that you're hauling out there.
Yeah. I get about 8 miles a gallon when I pull mine. And And then because I live pretty remote, it's hard to get contract people to fly drone. So I got licensed, which that's not a bad thing. I actually like it. And so then I'll go out there and I fly my drone. We do our Land Tour 360 and we do our aerial pictures and all of that, which is killer on the marketing end. I mean, nobody can top that. But all of these things, it takes a lot of time and investment on our side to even get these to market. It's a lot different, a lot more involved.
I wanted to speak to that real quick. You brought up the Land Tour 360. What he's talking about here is taking a drone up in the sky and creating a 3D rendering fly through of the property, similar to when you see 3D walkthroughs of houses. It's something that our company does. Nobody else has it because we're able to like geolocate specific targets on that 3D sky tour to where somebody can go in and tour your land from the air and see different locations on the ground. And I had to plug it, man. You mentioned it. So
no, I'm glad you did. I think it's one of my favorite things. And in fact, when I was looking at a place last week, it was that very deal. I drove 3.5 hours. The guy is a Vietnam vet, fixing to be 80. He'd actually been blown up by a bomb. Like it just barely missed him, but he was badly injured. Couldn't get around. And so I took my Can-Am just to drive him around so that he could show me his place, because there's no other way to do it. He couldn't walk it and there's no roads really. So the only way to make that happen was to take the Can-Am and let him point out everything to me, which is great. I mean, I get a firsthand knowledge of the ranch from the guy that's owned it for the last like 17 years. And we get to know each other, right? That's a great time to just talk about common interests, backgrounds, whatever. Because pretty solid one-on-one time when you're middle of nowhere with no distractions. And he's just bragging about how cool his place is. And I get a full-on update of all of it. And then while I'm there, I'm like, hey, dude, I've got my drone here. You want to sit in here while I fly it? He's like, yes. So I get my drone and I send it up and I do my panos. And, I'm telling him like, listen, I'm going to have to stitch all this and, I can show you all that later, but here, we'll fly it. I'm going to take some stills and whatever. We had a great time together. And he was just blown away that I could even just fly a drone and take pictures. Like to him, he thought that was the coolest thing. But it's a different level of preparation. And I will say this: I got by without having a side by side for a short while. But then I spent like $5,000 having my truck worked on, and I was like, all right, I'm pulling the trigger. This is a must. I've got to have it. And I don't regret it. It was a great purchase. I mean, it's better for the clients, but it's better for everybody involved, really.
So you've spoken to a couple things there too. If we're talking about the differences between like a residential market and a land market, is I've worked with several of my own home sales. I work with a guy here locally, for the most part until we get a national land person out here, but. Worked with this guy a few times now, and it's like I've sold multiple deals with him. I've never spent more than an hour with him, and like touring the property I'm selling or touring the properties that I'm looking at. And what you're talking about that's a day. That's like you're hanging out, you're with that person or on their land or talking to them. It's a day, and for these larger properties, it's more than one day. For one single property, right? And like that's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, there's a lot. And I mean, every now and then we'll get lucky. We'll have some absentee people that are a little more versed on what's going on or inherited it and they don't really care. We get a little bit of everything, but I would say in general, it is a little more in-depth. I'm not just putting a listing together and emailing them a seller's disclosure and saying, fill it out, and I'll be by on Tuesday to take some pictures. It's a whole nother level of involvement because there's a lot of emotion. Now there's emotion in homes too, especially estates and things of that nature. Somebody's been there for a long time and raised their kids. It can be an emotional move even on a house side, but the amount of sweat equity and memories that goes into land really seems, and I tell people a lot, if I could sell your emotion, I don't know if I could put a price on it, right? The amount of memories and feelings that go along with this piece of ground that you've been working on for however many years. In some cases, generations. It's tough for them to let go. It's not transactional at all. It's not so much I need X amount of money here, I'm not going to sell it. It's like this is all I've ever known, and you're selling my childhood, or I grew up on this ranch, and it gets pretty deep. Like you can feel it when you're there. You ride around with them. just how hard it is for them to even think about letting it go. So it's a kind of a privilege, in my opinion, to get to run around with these people. I mean, I had a guy take me to a bus stop. It just looks like an old CRP field next to a windmill. And he's like, nope, this used to be where the school bus picked the kids up. I was blown away, middle of nowhere, like 20 miles from the nearest town. And I'm like, you mean a bus drove way out here, took a county road, picked you up at this windmill? And he goes, yep. That's the only reason that extension of the county road's here. Is where the bus picked us up. I would have never known that if that guy hadn't had real life experience growing up there. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Well, and so we covered it really briefly there too. And the valuating of like a residence versus land. And like, you go into a residence and you have like a standard, you pull a comp, right? What's comparable to this house that is sold? And then you look at it, okay, well, this one sold here, but it didn't have granite countertops. So I can associate this much more money because of the granite countertops, the home improvements, or maybe this other one doesn't have any improvements and I can mark it down a little bit. And you can find your base really easily. I would argue most of the time really easily, but you can find a base somewhat comparable, run your comps and say, okay, we're in range between 40 and 50,000. Like we got it dialed here. With land, you could find an identical piece of land in terms of acreage, in terms of maybe home on that land, in terms of maybe, irrigation. You can find like a side by side, that stuff all lines up and they are still not even close. Like just give it on an area, how the land's maintained, what's gone into it, all that kind of stuff. They could be neighbors and still not even priced the same, right? It's just a different valuation.
Yeah, and that's where the expertise, I think, comes in. So, yeah, you can get into MLS on most occasions, like you were saying, and pull up a bunch of houses, and I can spit out a market analysis in an hour or two without really working too hard most of the time. I mean, if it's normal stuff. And when it comes to land, man, I rely on appraisers. We're going into a lot of different land sales platforms. I'm looking at what other places sold for. Something that I now ask pretty much everybody up front, what do you want for this property? Because a lot of them had a neighbor that sold for whatever, and they think it's worth that much, but they don't know anything about the neighbor's place, or did it really sell for that much? In most cases, they do know because they did talk at the feed store, like we were talking about, or at the local coffee shop, or at the gym, or at the vet. Who knows what it was? These guys talk to each other, and it's almost like an art. And I took one last year, and we sold it, and it took 7 months to get a buyer on it, because we had to find the right person that saw the value. And there were no comps to justify this property, but I knew in my heart what he wanted for it was not an unreasonable demand if I could find the buyer for it. And I did get one comp, just one, from an appraiser for more than what this guy wanted for this place. And I knew I could do it. And we finally found somebody that paid them cash within a small percentage of what they were asking. But it was a hard ask, and I had a lot of people lowball it. And my guy said, I know what I got. I'm not selling it till I get it. And I knew we could do it, and we did. It was hard. And that was one of those that I don't recommend everybody do. But the uniqueness of this property and where it was situated, the topography, the house was incredible. It had a ton of groundwater for this location. That was rare. There was a lot of stuff that it was hard to put a real figure on. But as a total package deal, I felt like we could get it there. So I found as much supporting documentation as I could get in case we had to get into an appraisal situation that I could try to justify some figures, because I wanted to back up my seller. Ultimately, somebody just rolled in there, stroked a check, and said, yeah, I think we're close enough. And we got a deal cut. But there's a lot more that goes into that. I mean, you start looking at fences. What kind of access is it? Is it deeded easement? Is it highway frontage? Is it county road frontage? Is there electricity? What's the groundwater like? What's the wildlife like? We talk a lot about highest and best use. If it's in the middle of nowhere, that's probably pretty much going to be a said thing. But Maybe it's not if you've got a high line running overhead. Is there a possibility to put a solar farm out there? Like, is there oil income being generated? There's so many things that can come in. If you're close to extraterritorial jurisdiction, you're on the edge of a city or out in the county, but it could be developed soon. You hear a lot of talking about rezoning. Maybe there's a lot more money to be made in that and development soon if you do a little work in front of that before you put it on the market. Man, there's just the amount of things that you can do with a piece of ground is, that's where I think a lot of knowledge, a lot of skill, it goes beyond just me having a range management background. I can tell people a lot about what you can do with just what you got. But when you start looking about future plans and what's capable of being done with that property in the future, that's where I think you start splitting hairs now into somebody that's really trying to help you and somebody just wants to get a sale, because there's a lot more involved there.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, there's the little nuances that you have to understand with land. Like, you're never going to have to go into a residence in town. I'm talking about in town. Residences outside of town could be a different story, but a residence in town, you're never going to have to go in and have a conversation about water rights. Like, well, your neighbor has priority, so you just got to wait until he's done. Like, so there you go. And then here's where you are in the succession of that. And here's where you get yours. And like, you might not actually get water this year. Do you know that? And walking them through those kind of scenarios. Or I just had a friend actually talk to me about wanted to harvest some timber, see the value of his timber on his land. And he was just like, well, yeah, so I just want to have somebody tell me what it's worth right now. I was like, well, that might not be the case, man. Like, you might have a value, but your value might not be able to be realized for 20 years. Like, just depending on what your site index is. Like, you could have an index of whatever, but like they're looking at what your land is worth in 20 years. It's going to be the value now. It's going to bring about value, but this is unrealized value that you can't capture for 20 years. It was one of those, he didn't believe me until he talked to a forester. And I was like, okay, look up foresters in this area, talk to them, have them run a site index, talk to you about your land. And he came back like, you were right. And it's those kind of conversations that there's just little tiny nuances to land that I guess the takeaway is, can somebody walk off the street as a residential agent and go and sell land?
If you don't have any background in it, you're gonna have a hard time. I believe that. And I want to go ahead and preface this just because I've been in residential for 15 years. I'm not knocking residential people.
It's a different skill set.
Oh, totally. Altogether. And residential's got its own quirks, and you learn a lot as you do it. Because you run into some hard stuff, whether, clearing title or weird surveys, or we have areas that don't have running water at all anymore because they ran out of groundwater and trying to get connected to a utility district. And you get all kinds of strangeness, survey, problems with septics and whatnot. But land is totally another world. And of course, where I'm at, it's a big city compared to some. You see a lot of overlap when you move into the more rural communities where you get a licensed realtor and they're going to sell commercial frontage on Main Street. They're going to sell Joe's house and they're going to sell Bob's farm. They're going to do a lot of overlapping. There's not as much specialty in the rural area, I don't think. So they may be a little more used to kind of seeing a whole menagerie of stuff. But overall, if you just were to come out of a residential background and walk out and you don't know anything about land, it's going to be hard. It's going to be real hard because you're not even going to want to know, like, how do I get values on all this stuff? What can I do with this land? How many cattle can I run? What grass is that? Like, how much did it cost to drill a water well out here? How deep's the water table? What do I know about mineral rights? Like, what's a good fence? How do I trap a coyote? Like, can I put a feeder up out here and kill a deer? I mean, if you don't know any of those, you're kind of wasting your time, really.
Yeah.
You can learn it. You can learn.
I was going to ask if it's your opinion on when you're looking at residential, you have with land, it's a lot of logistics management. It's how does this work? What does this do? What is the value of this? And then working with the landowner. In residential, it's a lot of people management. Like, can you get by without granite countertops? Like, what do you think about this view? What do you think about the closeness of your neighbors? Like, it's a lot of people management. Are you okay You don't like the paint color, knowing that you can change the paint in the future. That's a big one to me. It's always like, I hate the paint. Like, well, then get a brush. It's not that hard. But I get really cynical on that stuff. Like, Rick, come on, that's a paintbrush. Fix it. And it's like,
yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
That's my take.
No, you're right on that end, and that's something that I love about land is we're not arguing about the curtains and whether or not the flat screen TV mount's going to stay or not. You know, I mean, it's those things are impactful to some in the house deals, and that's cool, whatever. But being in real estate, probably I'm a little jaded on all that anyway. I'm just like, these things aren't that big of a deal in the grand scheme. You got a good rate, you like the house, you can fix a few things and make it like you want it, you win. You know, it's a good deal. Some people are more picky than others. I get that, but overall. But yeah, land is different. And I will say from the training aspect, so this is what's cool about like National Land, because I got to plug this. So I had a guy call me. He had like 160 acre farm and not terribly big, but he was interested in solar, right? Well, I know about land, but did I know anything about solar prior to coming on with National Land? Nothing, right? Other than I hated the solar panels that people were putting on the roofs of their houses because those can be a real pain. And I could do an entire segment on that. Now,
here I am. I just got mine. I'm looking at them right now.
Well, maybe we'll talk after this. Let me run you through some pitfalls. But, you know, I didn't know anything about solar, right? Solar farms. I see them. You drive by them. I know what they're doing. Didn't know how to get into it or anything about it or how people get one. And this guy said, I want solar. And I looked at all the stuff because we have the tools to do that, right? So I get into Landgate, I look it up, and I'm like, man, you know, you got some stuff close by, but you just don't have the acreage for the distance to get there, blah, blah, blah. Next thing you know, we pieced a bunch of stuff together. Neighboring landowners. Took us a lot of months. And 2 weeks ago, we were just offered $1,000 an acre on a solar farm. He would have never got that had we not pieced together some other parcels. And he's only getting a small piece of it. I feel a little bad. He got the smallest acreage out of everybody. And he was the one that kind of helped ramrod this deal. But it's still going to be a ton of money compared to just nothing. So I think his wasn't even being farmed anymore for CRP. And you wouldn't know what that was, right? Maybe if you weren't in the land industry, CRP, but or a farmer. But that's some stuff that you can learn when you get involved with a company like National Land, right? I was able to provide a service to that guy because I'd had the proper training to go, there's potential here, and yeah, I can help you. Now, we got 5 years of option, right? There's a long way to go with a lot of stuff to work through to get there to break ground. But, you know, I mean, it's a start. And I mean, that's the kind of stuff that you can be taught if you get with a land company that has the right tools to teach you. I know about land, but I didn't know about solar. I didn't know about wind, not any more than what you read on the internet. And so those are things that you could be taught, I think, with the right people. And that's what's so cool about our platform and with National Land is they build you up for success. So it's pretty cool.
You're like, you're for the plugs. Those are good.
Yeah. Well, and I'm not going to lie. I'm a little proud about it. That's the best one I've ever had. And that's like number 3 for the year that we're working on executing on solar farms. And these are like generational wealth changers. Huge. Like you'll never get this kind of money out of a dry land. I got 2 guys that may be making potentially over $1 million a year on a dry land farm in about 4 years, maybe. Wow. That's insane. Yeah. It blows my mind. And that'll change their whole life. Right.
And that's kind of it too. Like you can really change somebody's life with that. There's a more impactful consultative relationship that happens, I think, with land in general. And I don't want to come across like I'm bagging on residential agents. It's just like, if I'm being honest, it's a very different skill set and one that I don't want. People management to me is frustrating. And if it comes down to managing logistics, I want to manage logistics over managing people because you can't control people. You can't make them like the curtains, that kind of a thing. That to me gets frustrating. It's like, I actually admire residential agents because of that, because they can manage and navigate that part. Land to me is much more interesting because it is cool to be like, okay, this is the value of this and this is how it works. And I like that stuff. So, but I think the main takeaway though is that someone's not going to walk in out of either industry and know what the other one does. Like some of these guys that deal with just farms, if you put them in a residential thing, you would have, I mean, there would be burnt bridges all over the county just because you know what I'm talking about. You get a rural mindset person that sells like ranches in particular, and they go have to sell high-end luxury real estate. They're going to be like, you can't paint this wall. You won't buy this house because you can't. Get out of here. I don't want to talk to you again. Like you can just see it but that stuff matters on the residential side. And you have to be able to empathize with it and be like, okay, I understand. Well, here's how we can troubleshoot that. And let's go look at another house. It's a totally different mindset and skill set.
And it's fast paced. So when I'm like last year, I was really, really busy. I had an incredible year in residential. You're never not busy. Maybe I'm in the middle of doing home inspections, termite inspection, septic inspection, water well inspection, roof inspection, insurance inspections, then you got appraisals and you got surveys and you got the lender needing this and the title company needing that. And it's like the most insane 30, 40 days. It's just a whirlwind when you're under contract. Just nonstop. It eats you alive. It's a time killer. And it was taking a lot of time for me being able to get out in the field, because if I was going to go somewhere where I didn't have phone service, but we're trying to get a deal closed, and everybody's mad because they want to go on vacation, and I got a moving van lined up. I need to get the utilities turned on, and I need somebody to let me in to do a walkthrough, and I need someone over there to steam clean the carpet. And oh my Lord, I got to find a walkthrough. It's nonstop. It's a different ballgame. Land, for the most part, not always, but for the most part, it seems to be a lot slower paced. There's not as much tied to all the busyness that's going. I mean, if you got a house, there's stuff that's got to be done, or there's things that can be looked at, but it's not the same animal. It's a little different. And really, I have found, and you hit on this, and it's something that I like because I'm a very blunt person. I'm not great at sugarcoating stuff. And it's not because I want to be mean. I'm just really honest about stuff. And you talk to someone about land, you can be pretty honest. I mean, obviously you're going to be nice. You need to be respectful of whatever it is that you've got going on with them, but you can kind of lay it out. Just tell people the truth and be more frank about stuff and have normal discussions. That just don't seem to be that you can't have those talks in the house level. I mean, man, somebody just fire you in a heartbeat and go find another house realtor because, my cousin's, brother's sister is in junior league. And, if you're not going to kiss my butt, I'll find someone that will, and I'm out of here.
Right.
And there can be a lot less loyalty. It's definitely different.
I was going to say, it's a little more transactional in basis.
Yeah.
So
100%.
Anyways, hey, I want to let you plug your business here. I want to let you plug your time and let people know how to get a hold of you here in Texas.
Okay. Yeah. So, again, my name is National Land. Can we just delete that? Is there any way to just undo that?
I'm running that.
I'm telling you, man, I'm out of date. My name is Wayne Dunson, and I'm an associate broker for National Land in the West Texas office, way out in Midland, Odessa. And I cover a majority of West Texas, so I'd love to hear from you if you've got something out here. You could look us up on the website, nationalland.com, and then go to Texas, and you can find all the people in Texas listed there. You can hit me up at wdunson@nationalland.com, or just hit me on my phone number, which is 432. I'm gonna give you my direct line. I want to make sure I do this right because we've just changed numbers, and I'm still learning my new number here. So I don't want to lie to you. It's 432-287-7954. So if you hit me up right there, that'll go right to my cell phone.
Excellent. Wayne, as always, man, it's good talking to you.
I appreciate it, Matt.
That is 60 episodes down. Make sure to subscribe to the National Land Realty podcast. This concludes episode number 60, discussing the differences between residential real estate and rural land real estate. You can learn more about land ownership and the buying and selling of land at nationalland.com.